Well, welcome to another episode of Around the Interruption. I'm here with Joe Guidice. Many of you know him as a teacher, coach, um, but there's a lot more to Joe than meets the eye here. If you look at the background, Joe's not sitting in his backyard, with some cool green screen stuff you can do. But Joe, explain to people, where are you right now?
I'm at Marina Bay in Quincy. I'm on our office boat. I'm a towing captain for Towboat US, and we're based out of Marina Bay in Quincy. So I'm on the boat right now.
Okay, so you're not just a holdover from waterworks. You're not some fossil that never left you. You actually, it's a job. There's
Oh
a lot
yeah,
going on there. Yeah.
I'm on call. If we get a call, I gotta go.
So for those of you who don't know, get into a little bit of Joe's background. But Joe, you were in the Coast Guard as well. Is that how you kind of gravitated towards this gig?
The Coast Guard Auxiliary growing
Okay.
up, and then yeah, I went got my captain's license in 2012.
Uh-huh.
Um, I was actually teaching in New York,
Okay.
in the city,
Yep.
and I wanted to do something on the water, and and we get summers off. So I said, all right, what could I
Right.
do? I grew up in Long Island. I've been around boats, did the Coast Guard Auxiliary.
Uh-huh.
What could I do? So
Right.
I went down to New York Harbor, and I found this really cool wooden sailboat
Wow.
and started talking to the captain. And
Uh-huh.
he was from Long Island as well.
Okay.
We got to talking, and he said, hey, why don't you come work for me in the summer? So I started as a crew member. The name of the boat is the Ventura. It's still
Okay.
in New York Harbor. It's still operating.
Oh wow.
It's like a charter. Well, it's not operating right now, but it's still down there. And anyway, worked my way up, got my captain's license, and then I started, running boats down there, and then moved up here and started doing it up here.
Now, for people who don't know, I mean, I don't pick up a really thick accent, but you are from New York originally.
I'm originally from Long Island. Yeah, I've been up
Yeah.
here about 10 years now, 12 years. So
Mhm.
it's starting to wear off. My mom still makes fun of me the way I say water now. I don't say water.
Now, so you taught in the New York public schools, is that right?
I did for 4 years. I taught at it was MLK campus. So it was
Okay.
like 6 high schools in one building.
Wow. Jeez.
And it was actually the old Department of Ed, office building there.
Okay.
And so each floor of that building was a different high school, but all
Oh,
the
jeez.
high schools sort of mixed together in the gym.
Right.
So um, so yeah, they I taught there for 4 years. When I was there, I started a wrestling program,
Okay.
and I wrestled all growing up through high school and 1 year in college,
Mhm.
and so wrestling's always been something I was into. But yeah, I started a wrestling team there, taught phys ed there for 4 years, and I met my wife. I was teaching in New York City, and she was in social work school at NYU.
Oh wow.
And so we met. We lived separately. We started dating. Then we moved in together. Then we got engaged, and then we decided, well, we don't really want to live in city for
Right.
too long. It's expensive,
Oh yeah.
congested.
Yep.
It's tough to raise kids there. We eventually wanted to have a family, so
Mhm.
it was either move out to Long Island, which I wanted to, or move up to Massachusetts. She's originally from Wayland,
Okay.
so I went up there and visited her family, and I just kind of fell in love with up here.
Yep.
The mix of like the country,
Sure.
the outdoors, the woods, but then you also have the harbor right here, and
Right.
so I kind of fell in love with it up here. And I said, all right, let's go. Let's move up here.
Right. It's
And
pretty
yeah,
interesting that you made the switch from now you like the atmosphere, but was it a little bit of a culture shock for you as far as just norms or anything different or
yeah.
what was it like? You show up and people are like, I don't know about this guy. Like, what's going on here?
When I first moved up here, I was surprised that like things weren't open 24 hours. Like I'd be on my way home from somewhere, and I was like, oh, I'll get gas on the way
Right.
home. And then I'm
Yeah.
driving by every gas station, and they're all closed.
Right.
And then convenience store, things like that, like they close.
Mm,
And where I grew up, everything's open 24/7. So
sure.
that was definitely a shock.
Mhm.
But other than that, I mean, like honestly, traffic up here is just as bad as it is
Right.
in New York and Long Island. I was hoping that there'd be less traffic, but
Nope.
it's the same.
Yeah.
And you know, Boston is a city kind of like New York. I mean, it's smaller.
Right.
The public transportation in Boston isn't as
Yikes.
convenient.
Right.
You know, but other than that, there was really not much. You know,
Mhm.
the schools are definitely very different. The schools I
Really?
worked at are
Okay.
very different. So the school in New York was kind of like babysitting in terms of PE.
Yeah.
They would stick like 90 kids in a PE class with one
Wow.
teacher. So it was really impossible to do much of any educating.
Right.
It was kind of just like keep them active, keep the kids from killing each other, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then when I came up here, you know, small class sizes, every
Sure.
kid got a laptop.
Mhm.
You got really great support from administration.
Oh
So
yeah.
coming up here, it was like, wow, I actually get to teach PE now, you know, like my classroom management skills were, you know, forged down in the city. And
Mhm.
then when I came up here, really my actual putting the rubber to the road of education kind of really came into its own. I was allowed to teach, you know?
Now, were you more like a drill instructor when you first got to Natick, and kids are like, "Whoa, who is this?" Because you're used to kids that are just kind of, off the walls. Where the kids in Natick, I'm
Yeah.
not
I
saying they're
mean,
like that, but they might be a little more subdued than inner city New York City kids.
it's funny you say that. I actually was just on Facebook the other day, and one of my, well, a former student, I never had this student, but they posted something about, you know, who are those nut jobs that would get into fights at school at 8 a.m? And then the kid wrote like, I'm that kid. But
Wow.
anyway, my first day here, my first day at Natick, I'm in the gym, and then a fight breaks out my first day. So I was like, I thought I left this all behind. And it ended up being two really great kids that I'm still in contact with
Sure.
today. I think they've been out of school like 6 years now.
Okay.
But it was just funny how that I was like expecting this to be like, you know, completely different, like suburban, you know, a little bit more socioeconomically, you know, gifted area, so to
Yeah.
speak, than New York City. And then there's a fight on the first day that I'm there, so that was kind of funny. But the kids are different. I actually kind of when I got to New York, I was kind of like that drill instructor type
Yeah.
of, you know, hard, you know, nose type of strict guy.
Mhm.
And I found that that didn't really work.
Right. They tune you out.
So yeah, so by the time I got up here, I realized that like that doesn't work.
Mhm.
And so I didn't really do that too much up here, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised by the kids up here are a little bit more respectful. There's different problems. Don't get me wrong. There's
Oh yeah.
different issues in the different communities,
Right.
but the kids up here were more respectful, more apt to follow instructions and things like that. So
Mhm.
it was a blessing to come up here, really.
So the education is slightly different, like you were talking. Wrestling, I know it's a big part of your life. You're one of the coaches on the wrestling team. What's wrestling like in Long Island versus Natick or Massachusetts in general? Is it night and day?
It was. I was really shocked when I mean, so in Long Island, with many of the sports that kids are successful in, like lacrosse and
Mhm.
football, um, the kids start at such a young age.
Right.
All of them. Like if you're a
Okay.
kid in Long Island, you grow up, you're either doing like youth wrestling, youth hockey, youth lacrosse, or youth football. Those are like the big
Right.
sports down there. Um, and then there's a middle school team. Like when I came up here, there really was not a lot of middle school sports, and they were pretty disorganized.
Right.
Um, and in middle school, my practices were run like the varsity high
Right.
school practices are run
Yep.
now. We had 5 days a week. We had a full dual meet schedule. We had tournaments. So I mean, for me, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade was like what freshman, junior, and sophomore,
Yeah.
you know, freshman, sophomore, junior year is like in high school. So I think the level of wrestling in New York, specifically Long Island and or other places of New York, like Section 9, which is like mid-state, um, those areas wrestling is a little bit more advanced,
Right.
and just because the kids have the experience. So Coach Anabali and I actually kind of came together, and we took the youth program that was run through the rec program,
Right.
and we made that a legitimate middle school team.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was to make like a feeder program
Sure.
that we could send kids up. And I think, I don't know the exact numbers, but if you look at all the sectional place winners on the high school team from this past season,
Mhm.
almost all of them wrestled in the middle school program.
Right. Yeah, I know with
So
a lot of the other programs, I know that because well, part of my job is to cover all the sports, but
yeah,
we see the best results with the programs that start in official middle school team relationships, whether it's girls field hockey or lacrosse or any of those sports. The ones that just start in high school, they're okay, but the ones that start even before middle school, you really see results.
yeah. And the level of wrestling in Massachusetts is going up to the
Mhm.
point where like Coach Annabali will tell you he could have taken a high school freshman that never wrestled before,
Yeah.
and by the time they were a senior, they could have been a state champ.
Okay.
And that, I think that's getting tougher and tougher to do
Right.
as other schools in the state are starting to get these programs and build up the sport.
Mhm.
It's great for the sport, but it just makes it so that you gotta start a little earlier if you're really interested in doing that.
In Massachusetts, I know when I cover the meets, sometimes the kids are too heavy and they can't wrestle. Is it like that everywhere, or is that just, that Massachusetts thing?
So that's a high school federation rule.
Okay.
285 is the weight limit.
Okay.
It used to be unlimited back in
Right.
the day. It used to be heavyweight and you could weigh whatever.
We're talking 10 years ago, 30 years ago,
Man, I'm not. My wife
before
will
you
tell you
maybe?
I'm horrible with dates. When I was in high school in 2002, you could weigh whatever you wanted.
Okay. And too
So
many injuries probably, and they said, all right.
probably injuries and
Yeah.
recommendations from doctors that it's unhealthy to be that heavy or something. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
whatever.
yeah, but they did put that into place. Um, so yeah, there is a weight limit in terms of how much you can be. And there's actually, when I was in New York, I found out there's a weight minimum.
Really?
So in New York, the lowest weight class is 96 pounds.
It was a super confetti weight. What is that?
And I don't know what they call it, but you have to weigh at least 88 pounds. So I hated forfeiting weight classes. Like I
Sure.
hated, because you give up 6 points
Oh
if you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
have every kid.
Right.
And in the city at the time, not many teams had kids. So I was trying to have my team be successful and have kids at each weight so that if they didn't have a kid, we could take a forfeit if we
Sure,
needed.
absolutely.
So I had this little kid. He was an immigrant from West Africa, from Mali, and he weighed like 85 pounds.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
every day before he would weigh in, he would go to the water fountain and just like he'd be sitting there
Oh
for like
boy.
3 minutes just gulping down water, and his stomach was all puffed out from eating so much water. And he would get on the scale, it would be like 88.1. And he
Wow.
would like he would be so happy. That's one of my funniest memories from coaching down in New York. And meanwhile, all the other kids are trying to manage their
Sure.
weight to stay at their weight class. And he's like stuffing his face with, bacon, egg, and cheese and drinking water. And he's just
Right.
trying to get to his 88 pounds.
Now you definitely weren't one of the kids that was too heavy to wrestle. When you were in high school, what'd you wrestle at?
I started at 96 and graduated at 135.
Okay, and then you wrestled a little bit in college, you said?
Yeah, I wrestled for like a year. Did some of the club team there too. And then I actually I was just starting to get into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu at that time, and then I actually fought in professional mixed martial arts,
Oh wow.
and that's when I had my first fight down there in 2006,
Okay.
and so I kind of put everything else on the back burner and just focused on Jiu Jitsu
Wow.
and training.
So you started off with the wrestling. Did you
Yep.
do like taekwondo or karate, or did you drive right into jiu-jitsu, or how did all that come about?
So it's a funny story. My All right, so you're about my age. You know the
Yep.
movie Fight Club? Fight Club
Oh yeah.
came out.
Oh yeah.
So me and my buddies in high school, like 10th grade, we always used to hang out at this one kid's house in his basement, and then Fight Club comes out. So we used to do like our own version of Fight Club,
Oh
and
jeez.
yeah, so we would put like you know couch cushions on the floor, and we would just basically everything was allowed except you couldn't punch each other in the face. So we would like body shots and
Oh,
all that, like grappling, submissions. We
right.
were also big into watching the UFC at the time as well.
Right. That's something I wanted to ask you about, Joe, before you get into it. Um,
Yeah.
Something for me and my friends, the reason that the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was so appealing was the first couple of UFC fights,
Oh
where
yeah.
it was, you got the
Boys
Gracies,
Gracie. Yeah.
they're going after these guys that are twice their size, and they're
Yep.
taking them down. That was a real appealing thing to me. I don't know if as a kid you saw that, and we're like,
So
wow, like if that works, that's what I want to do. That's how
absolutely.
it appealed to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just seemed like and that was a huge, like, I don't know if you
Right.
know, but the Hoist Gracie's uncle was one of the original
Oh yeah.
creators of the
Yep.
UFC. They made the UFC to show how effective their family's martial
Right.
art was.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So we were down in the basement, beating each other up, and
Right.
just because I wrestled and none of my other friends did,
Oh, you're
I,
heads and tails
I
of
would
those
always
guys.
beat them. I would
Yeah.
always beat everybody. So
Yeah.
I would like just take them down and get them in some like a half Nelson and crank their neck or something, but I would always win. And then I went away to college my freshman year, and we came back over like winter break or something. And one of my buddies, who is smaller than me, got me in an arm bar. And I'm there, my arm's extended, and I'm like, oh, I tapped.
Yeah.
And I go, dude, what was that? He goes, yeah. He goes, I've been training jiu-jitsu for about 3 months. So that was the wake-up call to me. Like, all right, I've been wrestling my whole life.
Right.
I've been beating all my buddies up. We're not trying to kill each other. We're having fun. Right. But at the same time, I've been beating them all in this fight club that we've been doing.
Uh-huh.
And then he trains this martial art for 3 months, and he beat me. So, like, to me, I was like, I got to go do that.
Sure.
So the next day I said, all right, I want to come to jiu-jitsu class with you. Where are you training at?
Right.
So he was training with Matt Serra. Matt Serra had a school in Long Island. Actually had 2 at the time, but one of them was in Levittown, which is not too far from where I live. And that was it. I walked in the door. I was hooked the first day, signed up, and I would train over the breaks. I would come home, train, go back. I went to school in upstate New York, in Cortland State. I was so into it. I started a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu club.
Oh, wow.
Up there, so I could keep training while I was up there.
Right.
Through them, I actually met. You follow UFC, Tamden McCrory. His nickname is the Barn Cat. So him and I went to school at the same time. He was in my Brazilian. He started MMA from doing my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club. And then I don't know if you remember from the Ultimate Fighter, Spencer Page.
Sure.
He trained with me up there. Eric Charles, who was, he was up there as well. He was on Ultimate Fighter. He lost his first fight. He was more of a stand-up guy. Right. But I met a guy named Ryan Ciatoli who wrestled for Ithaca. Right. And he started what was called the Bomb Squad. So Central New York Bomb Squad was the name of their team. Sure. And that's who I started training mixed martial arts with. So I was doing jiu-jitsu with the Serras down in New York. Yeah. And then when I would go up to school, I was doing my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club and then training with Ryan and Tamden and Spencer and all those guys, doing like stand-up and mixed martial arts. So
now we're looking at what, 15 years you've been doing this now, maybe? Or
yeah, I definitely with a break in the middle. When I moved to the city, I stopped training jiu-jitsu.
Just because it was too busy, or you couldn't find a place? Or?
Yeah, no, it was expensive. I was living in the city. Like you're talking like $300 a month to train jiu-jitsu in Manhattan. Okay. Whether you're at Renzo Gracie's school, Marcelo Garcia's school is another popular one in there. So I probably took like a 6-year layoff, which, I kick myself for now, but I'm really glad that I moved up here and then found, Gabe Gonzaga and his school. So.
Yeah, I want to talk a little more about that. So you moved up to the Wayland area. Now, people that know the Wayland area in Worcester, where the squared place is, that's not exactly a 5-minute drive.
No,
was it more you saw, what they call this guy, the Nose? Is that his nickname there?
It means he has big nostrils.
Yeah. Portuguese, there's a translation there. I think there's a little bit.
Yeah, and the Portuguese nicknames, you don't pick yourself. Somebody else gives it to you, and you just have to take it.
Okay. Now, so you take these classes in Worcester. Was it a lot different from what you did when you were in New York? With different style, different philosophy? Like, did you like jump in and go, this is what, just like I used to do, that's why you like it so much? Like, what was the attraction?
Definitely a different style. The way I found them is actually through a guy from Natick. And he actually runs. There is a squared affiliate in Natick. Okay. It's not where Gonzaga teaches often. He's out there like once or twice a week. Sure. But I met him. I actually don't even remember how I met him. When I first moved up here, I found what was called the Dragon Lair, which is in Framingham.
Yep.
It's actually not where it used to be. Now it's it's still in Framingham, but it was like right downtown Framingham on like the third floor of a building up there. But anyway, I started training up there with a guy named Mario Ramos. And they did a lot of no-gi stuff, like not the traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu uniform. They were more geared towards fighting. And I was kind of done with that, like great school, great people, great guy. But I wanted to train in the gi.
Okay.
So that's like, I really love that. That's my favorite area.
And why do you have a personal preference? Is it just more traditional, you feel? Or how do you, what's the
traditional? It's a slower technical game. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with the gi on is all about making grips, and you can use leverage a lot more. I feel like no gi, where it's just like what you might call submission grappling or submission wrestling, is more of an athletic, quick, explosive type of game where you can get away with making a mistake if you're quick and athletic.
Sure.
If you're wearing the gi, it's a very durable type of cloth. There's a lot of cloth on cloth friction. You can't really explode out of moves. So you really have to rely on technique a lot more.
Okay.
So I like that. I like the technique aspect, especially me being a smaller practitioner.
Okay.
I'm rolling with guys that are 250 pounds. So if my technique is off by a little bit, I'm going to get crushed.
Right.
So I like to train with the gi on just because it really focuses on the technique more. But anyway, I was with Mario in Dragon Lair, and then somehow through them I met Dave, who's the guy who runs the Squared affiliate in Natick. And I did an open mat there. They had an open mat on Sunday, and I went down, and I really liked the school. I recognized the name, obviously, Gabe Gonzaga from UFC.
Right.
And so I kept going there. And then Gabe came down and taught a class, and I kind of slowly worked my way into like a regular routine training schedule now. I was kind of hooked again. I was like, just like that first class I went to back in, when I was a freshman in college, I was hooked all over again. And then I found out, okay, they have a school in Worcester. Let me go check that out. I like training with different people.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Natick school, while it is really convenient that it's close, the class sizes were a little smaller.
Okay.
And that was one difference from New York for sure. At the Sarah Brothers Academy, now, when I went, Matt had just won the title from George St. Pierre.
Right.
So he was a UFC champ. So his school was packed. Everybody wanted to train with him. His brother Nick is also teaches there. He fought a few mixed martial arts fights, but I mean their jiu-jitsu was incredible. So everyone wanted to train with them. So the class sizes were packed. You're talking like 30, 40 guys on the mat on any given night. Yeah. So I was used to that. That was a difference definitely coming up here. So I wanted to go check out Worcester. I heard Worcester had bigger classes.
Right.
At the time when I started training up here, I was a purple belt. So there were more of advanced belts out in Worcester, so you get a more technical type of role. So I went out there, and Gabe Gonzaga taught there almost every night. So I said, all right, I want to learn from the master. I want to be here. I want to train with these guys.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I would make the drive out to Worcester, train in Natick on the weekends. If I couldn't make it out to Worcester, I would go there. But anyone that knows me, and my wife will tell you, when I do something, like I do it all out.
So how many times a week are you training then? When typically?
Back before all this coronavirus madness, I was training 6 nights a week. I mean, between Worcester and Natick, and the Sunday, Saturday, whenever my schedule allows, I would get down there and train. And then I also would actively compete whenever I could. I really enjoy competing as well. So, 6 nights a week, I was trying to get down there.
So it is addictive then, huh?
It is for me.
It's funny. I know the way I get into the jiu-jitsu, as far as actually seriously considering it, it's a lot of people kind of got in this way with the connection with Anthony Bourdain.
Okay,
his ex-wife was in it, and part of he'd travel all around the world, but one of the production assistants, it was their job, make sure there's a place that he can get on the mat if they're in that town.
Yep.
And that was one person's job. Every show they ever did, he's like, make sure that I can do it. And he did it
Yeah.
later in life when he was 50, which is kind of nice. Where some people might be intimidated. Hey, I'm older. Hey, I don't have not much of an athlete. But no matter who you are, no matter what you do, you can do it, which is nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is that it literally means in Japanese the gentle art. That's what jiu-jitsu means, and it can be as intense or as relaxed as you want it to be. I mean, obviously, if you watch a match and you watch people compete, it's not that gentle. But in terms of, like I was saying, with the gi and the techniques,
Right.
you can finesse a move and not have to use any strength really at all. It's all just about how you position your body. And whereas a sport like wrestling and even judo, they're grappling sports, but they're very intense.
Right.
They're very like head to head, like think of like two rams just going, button heads. Jiu-jitsu is more, it can be more of a flowy type of experience depending on your training partner. Not everyone trains jiu-jitsu to compete.
Right.
Some people train just to stay flexible, have some muscle. It's like you said with Anthony Bourdain, the lifestyle of jiu-jitsu and the camaraderie you get from your training partners and things, that's what draws a lot of people in. So you can continue on with jiu-jitsu. I mean, we got guys up in their 60s that are training with us in Worcester. So, you can.
The competitions for someone who has been to a Naidakai wrestling match, there's a little bit of theatrics, which is not typical in the Bay State. You sent me some videos. I've been playing them throughout this interview. I'm editing it in post, but
Got it.
you have quite an entrance too. There's music involved. I see some smoke machines in the background. And it's pretty intimidating. Now you compete at is it 156-pound weight class now? Am I right?
No, 145.
45.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Okay, I read something else, but there's posters involved for this. I mean, it's pretty intense. I'm looking at some of these images now, and I don't know if you can maybe just briefly talk about some of these. You have a Guidice versus Stockton. Is that something is that the one that was the no-gi?
That was a no-gi competition. That was actually the first no-gi professional grappling event that was held in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, the New York Athletic Commission had banned it for a long time.
Really? Okay.
And it couldn't be professional. It had to be like some sort of U.S. I think the U.S. Amateur Kickboxing Association sanctioned a lot of the grappling events.
Okay.
But this one, we had to get blood work done. We had to we had to go meet with a doctor that day. And that was actually a last minute fill-in. I was cruising through Facebook and I saw, I'm obviously friends with a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu community.
Sure.
And they were looking for an opponent. And like I said, I love to compete. And I said, hey, I emailed the guy, said, I'll do it. He's like, sure. So I drove down there and got it done.
Now, what was that like? Because you said you like using the gi. With the no gi competitive wise, I imagine at the level that you compete at, a lot of it is you are thinking like you're playing chess, but a lot of it's muscle memory and automatic. And you have to kind of subconsciously be like, I can't grab that. I can't do this. This move won't work as good. Do you have to think about that before the match, or is that you already kind of like in your head do like a simulation, so that when you're actually on the mat, you know what you're gonna do?
For that match, I think I had a couple weeks leading up to it that I could train. So I took the gi off for those 2 weeks, and I only trained no gi. But we train no gi once a week, usually on Sunday on our open mat.
Okay.
We train no gi. So I have done it. And not to mention the wrestling experience that I've had, I kind of have that muscle memory, like you said, in there from years and years of wrestling. It is different. It's definitely a different type of game. There are different moves that are allowed, no gi, that are not allowed in the gi. For example, heel hooks.
Sure.
Which are heel hooks are a move that put a lot of stress on your knee and your ankle, and it's a type of move where
a guy won't tap out; he'll get hurt.
Right, exactly.
And that's why they banned them. That's what I heard.
Exactly. They're banned in the gi because, number one, the friction involved with the pants being on it's much harder to escape your leg, and your leg could get caught in there, and you can do a lot of damage to the knee. But the thing with the heel hook is you won't feel any pain until your knee pops.
Yeah, until it's too late.
This guy has you in a heel hook. If you don't know what's going on, you think, okay, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden your ACL pops, and you can, I've seen guys that haven't tapped to heel hooks, and they've been not the same in their whole career after that. So that was a big change to go into a match where heel hooks were allowed. But I credit the Serras brothers for this. Heel hooks are nothing new. It's a new thing now in grappling because they're becoming more popular. But heel hooks have been around in grappling forever. And we used to train them and drill them back when I was learning as a white belt and a blue belt. So I had that in my mind. I knew what heel hooks were. I knew how to escape them. I knew, the positions where you could be in danger of being put in one. So I definitely felt more comfortable. Whereas if you took a modern day jiu-jitsu player that only trained the gi and never trained no gi, if you put them in a no gi type of atmosphere now, they're going to be at a big disadvantage because that game is very different. The two games now between no gi and the gi game, now they're so different that if you took somebody who never had experience without the gi, they would definitely be at a disadvantage to the no gi player.
That was something I came across. I mean, I don't have nearly the experience in wrestling or jiu-jitsu as you do, but the internet's great. You can read stuff. You don't always know how it's going, but before we did this interview, I looked at a lot of the Eddie Bravo interviews. He's a big no-gi guy. That's all.
Yep, that's his game. Yeah, that's his thing.
He talks about the heel hooks a lot, and then he'll go on a show, and he'll go on like the Joe Rogan show, and Joe Rogan will talk about all his experiences. And then they'll have, some of the Gracie guys on. They go, oh, well, we do this because of this or whatever. So there's a lot of different philosophies around it. And what I thought was really interesting, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's internet warriors everywhere. But, a lot of guys, they kind of listen to what the guy says, and it's just a different point of view. And the gi versus no gi thing, which I think it's a really interesting argument.
Yeah. In terms of, like, what's more effective, I think you got to look at what your goal is, If your goal is to be a mixed martial arts fighter, you should probably train without the gi more often. If your goal is to, really delve into the sport of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and to learn about the traditional aspect of it, then you put the gi on and, you learn about all the different grips. And I just, as far as what's more effective in terms of like a street fight situation, I think if you're training something, first of all, you're already ahead of the game. If you're training both gi or no gi, if you're just in the gym training those things, you're ahead of the curve. And then as far as like, what's more effective out of those two, it depends. If you're on the beach, no gi's going to be more effective. If you're in Boston in the wintertime and you're walking around and you got a jacket on and pants, then the gi is going to be more effective. It's really just a matter of the atmosphere. But like I said, if you're training, you're ahead of the curve. So that's my take on it.
Okay. We have another a picture here. It says Guidice versus Eric Johnson. The height disadvantage. That was something you could see evidently from the video right away. Can you explain that to me a little bit and how that went down?
That match was at 155, not 145. So I gave up a little weight there. That match was actually for an organization called Tap Cancer Out. They're a nonprofit that they host a tournament for like the general population. Anyone can enter it. And then at that night, they have these anytime there's a match of 1 versus 1, they call it a super fight in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So they host these super fights. And
I thought you were the super fighter, so it sounded really impressive.
Yeah, right. There's a night, they call them super fights. It's not a tournament. Think of it like a tournament is the bracket where you have to work your way to the finals. Sure. A super fight is just a 1 versus 1 match. That's all.
Wow, super fight. He must be like the best in the area.
Yeah, right. Maybe someday. But anyway, Eric Johnson and I have been competing against each other since purple belt. We've had 3 matches. I actually had another super fight against him at a different organization. And I just they put out an application process to get one of these super fights.
Sure.
And the guy emailed me. He said, I matched you up against Eric Johnson. And I said, great. I'm whoever they tell me I have a match against, I'll take it. I'm not going to. So even if we had matched up already, that was a fun fight. And, because we've had a bunch of matches together, he knew my game very well. The first match we had, I submitted him with a loop choke. It's one of my favorite chokes to go for.
Okay.
Basically, you grab across the guy's collar, you push his head down, you put your hand there, and you twist like this, and their own collar chokes him. Then the second time we had a match at this other organization called Kashkudo, I got him with a triangle choke, which is another one of my favorite moves. And then this third match, he kind of knew my game. He knew I liked that cross collar grip. He knew that I liked to underhook the leg and lift and all these things. So the way I got him in this match was actually off of his escape. So I grabbed his collar, I pulled down, I underhooked his leg, and I was starting to take him up, and he turned his body and tried to kick away from me. And when he did that, his foot went in front of my face like this, and I got him in what's called a toe hold. So I grabbed his foot, I grabbed my own wrist, and what it does is it basically cranks the ankle the way that it doesn't want to go, like as if you rolled your ankle on a basketball game or something. And so I got him to tap with that. So, height really doesn't mean too much when you're on the ground, If it was boxing,
is it something? Do you bait a guy you or on the ground with? You're like, I'm gonna leave something a little open because you think they're gonna maybe get a little excited, and then it's easier to submit them. Is that something you look at, or do you don't even think about it like that?
At this point, I've been doing it so long, I don't really think about it. Okay. It's not a conscious thing that I'm like in my own head during the match. It's more just like I've done it so many times that I make these different grips, and I know, okay, if I have my cross collar grip, I have a lot of different options off there. And I know that if I pull this way and he tries to pull back, now I'm going to switch to an underhook, and then I'm going to do something. If I pull and he goes with it, now I'm going to underhook his leg and start to take him over this way. So it's more just like I've done it so many times now. As you get up in skill level in jiu-jitsu, you don't have that time to think. If you take a second to think about what's going on, the person is already on to the next thing. So when I first started, it definitely was like that, where you're there and you're like, all right, I got this grip. What do I do now? Yeah. And honestly, when I roll with Gonzaga, that's how it is for me. He shuts down everything I could possibly do. That sometimes I'm caught in positions and I'm like, all right, what can I do here? I don't even, so I do get the best of both worlds. When I train with my teammates, and I have some guys that I'm better than. There's guys that we have really great matches, and then there's guys like Gonzaga that, if they wanted to, could just whoop me. So yeah, it's great. That's one of my favorite things about jiu-jitsu, actually, is the different levels to the game. Oh yeah. And a lot of people, when they first start, they don't realize those levels. Like Gabe Gonzaga is like a 5th degree black belt, which means he's had his black belt for almost 20 years now. Wow. So he's been a black belt for longer than I've been training, just to put that into perspective. Yeah. And the skill level difference, I mean, he also was a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu world champion. So the skill difference between him and I is greater than like if a white belt walked in the gym, which is like the day one, he would beat me worse than I could beat the first day white belt, if that makes sense. Like right. The skill jump between, even at the highest levels, is incredible. And to me, that blows my mind. Oh yeah.
So something that I like, Joe, though, it is impressive. And I hate to bring it up again, but I know when Eddie Bravo won, he was, I think, a blue belt or a purple belt, I think. Yep. Which usually it's okay, black belts compete against black belts, but in jiu-jitsu, anybody can compete against anybody. Anyone. And then once you learn the technique, if you know what you're doing, you can get almost anybody to tap. I'm not saying 100% of the time, right? But if you know what you're doing, it's pretty impressive to watch.
Yeah, there are some like for example, right now in the game, there's a guy named Nick Rodriguez.
Mhm.
He's a no-gi competitor out of New Jersey, and he was a D3 wrestler in college. Nothing like world beater. He wasn't like an NCAA world champ, and he just got his purple belt. So he was a blue belt when he competed at ADCC. I don't know if you're familiar with what
Oh yeah.
that is.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like the Olympics of
Yeah.
submission grappling.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like it's the top level
Yep.
for that sport.
Yep.
And he went in there and he was beating, previous world champ black belts
Right.
that have been training for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
He was beating them, and he was a blue belt.
Yeah.
Just on, that raw skill, the
Sure.
determination. Obviously, he's a very explosive, athletic type of athlete.
Right.
And I think that's what I was trying to say before. No gi actually lends itself to that a lot more. You can
Okay.
be a newer athlete to the game, no gi, and do much better than if you were a newer athlete to the game and put the gi
Right.
on. The gi equalizes that as
Oh
far
yeah.
as, in my opinion. But yeah, he's a blue belt. And actually there's an organization called Flow Grappling. It's like the Netflix for grappling matches.
I think their links is on their links is on some of the videos you sent me. That's where they
Okay.
come from, right?
So Flow
Yeah.
Grappling made a documentary about Nick Rodriguez, and they called it the Black Belt Slayer because he was this blue belt just going out there and like beating guys that
Right.
have been world champs. And so yes, to your point, anyone can put some work in, and if you're gifted and you're dedicated enough, you can do really well in the sport.
Well, there is some hope because there's a lot of martial arts or sports, whatever in general. Wrestling is a perfect example. I talk to kids that are, freshmen, sophomores. Oh man, I hate wrestling practice. I get my butt kicked every single day, but eventually I'm gonna win. And
Yeah, right.
and when they finally do win and they're able to compete at that meet that week, they're so excited. But you can tell how there could just because a kid doesn't weigh a lot, the kid's he's still competing against a senior or a state title holder or whoever. And it's so much work for those kids to finally get to that point. And it's such a sense of accomplishment for them. But I know as a 14 to 15-year-old kid, getting my butt kicked every day in practice, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but when you do actually accomplish it, it's great. But for the average kid to stick with it, I can understand why they might not. I know a lot of ex-wrestlers, a lot of kids who tried it. I don't know a lot
Yeah.
of kids who tried it, were successful with it, and kept going with it. You know what I mean?
It's not easy. It is a tough sport. Wrestling is a tough sport. Grueling practices.
Yeah.
It's a winter sport. It's a long season. It's a grind for sure. But there are some rare, weird, sick people like me that love that grind.
Right.
Like love that. Just put your head down and work, and and you'll see those kids in the wrestling room. You know who those kids are.
You see them right away, yeah.
You know them right away just by the way they drill, the way they practice. Like right now, for example, Louis Linton is one of those kids.
Right.
He's a smaller kid right now, and he got some varsity experience at the lightest weight class, but he was way under that weight class. And no matter what, he took his lumps out on the mat. He busts his butt in practice. Even when I had him in middle school, hardest worker in the room.
Right.
Never, like, you say, all right, guys, up and jogging, let's go. He's the first one up with his shoes on, running. Not a complaint. Like that. Those are the type of kids that are going to be successful no matter what. And in my opinion, that type of attitude is going to help you be successful no matter what you do.
Yeah, no matter what.
Where you just kind of put your head down and work and grind, because not everything you got to do in your life is fun. And I feel like a lot of kids now, oh, it's not, I don't like to, it's not fun. I don't enjoy that. I'm not doing that. And, they're setting themselves up for a tough lesson when they get in the real world,
Do any of the kids kind of, hear you talking in conversation or hear about the jiu-jitsu? Any of the kids kind of got into it, or like, is there anything in Natick wise? Because I'm a little, I'm not quite on the level you are. Is there a lot of interest with jiu-jitsu with high school kids now, or not really, or what's the?
The kids, they like to, when we're at practice, sometimes you'll see them doing some jiu-jitsu, rolling around on the mat. Actually, I told you there was a squared affiliate in Natick.
Sure.
the location where that is actually where Coach Annabali holds his wrestling club.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So a lot of times their practice is ending and I'm getting in there and about to start my jiu-jitsu class. So
Oh.
they see it, they know it exists.
Yeah.
And actually I've had numerous former wrestlers when they graduate high school come back and train with me in jiu-jitsu. So it's definitely, it's like when you compete in wrestling, after high school, if you don't wrestle in college, there's not much left for you to do. It's not like, you know, you can go play pickup basketball at a park. You can't go take somebody down at a, you know what I mean? So this is an experience where if you wrestled, you can come and still grapple and get that experience in a little bit more of a less competitive atmosphere as being on like a team sport, you know?
Is there a big learning curve where I know, like, we always get a kick out of it? So I cover the high school sports. We'll see a kid who is a basketball player and they're 6+, they're really athletic, and they go, I'm going to play volleyball. It looks easy.
Yeah, right.
And it's not. Do you see kids that are wrestlers go, oh, well, I can do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and you know, like, what their go-to wrestling move would be? So they're constantly exposing themselves over and over until they learn the right way to do it.
Yes, there is a bit of a learning curve for wrestlers when they come to jiu-jitsu. The biggest thing is that in jiu-jitsu, if you are not the person that's on top, you want to be on your back under that person.
Right.
So you can start using your legs and arms to manipulate their body so that you can either get on top of them or get them in some sort of submission hold.
Right.
So wrestlers, what they do is when they're getting taken down in a jiu-jitsu match, they'll instinctively go to their stomach because in wrestling, you don't want to be on your back. And that's really bad because now in jiu-jitsu, I'm allowed to reach my hand around your neck and I'm allowed to put a choke on you. So that's a big learning curve, is to not give up your, you know, not to go to your belly, to retrain them to go to their back instead. But most wrestlers do pretty well at first, just because of like understanding how your body moves on the mat, how your hips move is a big thing. Like being able to, in wrestling, we call it a hip heist. So if you're on your back, you escape one leg underneath you and then you're back to your stance. That's a huge thing to teach somebody when they first start jiu-jitsu. So if they never wrestled, just teaching how to move your body it takes a long time. So wrestlers get to kind of skip that whole curve.
Sure.
So there is a learning curve for wrestlers, but it's much faster than if you didn't wrestle at all.
Okay. One of the criticisms I heard about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is they go, well, if you're in a fight with somebody, you just don't plop down on your back and then try and beat them up. Like it gets to that point. Now, this is someone who, you know, just looked at it from the outside looking in. And I kind of understand that argument. Once you're in a street fight, it always ends up on the ground.
Right.
But, you know, for the average person, just be like, okay, well, here comes somebody, and they just flop back on their back. You would never do that either, because then the top game, the person would just pummel you. So there's a lot more to it than that. So there's so much more that the average person doesn't understand about jiu-jitsu. And getting into it, like you said, talking about the wrestling, talking about other things, you know, whether it's gi or no gi, there's so much more technical stuff that what I've understood was that, you know, the white belt introduction, by blue belt, you kind of get the concepts. You just can't physically do it yet. Is that kind of like the idea?
By the time you're a blue belt, you have the fundamentals down.
Right.
You should be able to do an arm bar from the bottom guard. You should be able to do what's called a sweep, where if someone's on top of you, you should be able to do a series of moves where you end up on top of them. That's called a sweep. So you should know how to do at least a few of those. You should know how to what's called pass the guard, which is when your opponent is on their back in front of you, and you get around their legs and get to the side of them, almost like what a wrestling pinning position should be. You should know how to do that. You should have all the fundamentals down in terms of like, we practice falling, you know, it sounds silly, but we practice falling the right way, where you're not going to put your arm out and then have your arm hit the ground and then either, you know, hurt your wrist, elbow, or shoulder. You should know how to do all those. You should know how to do like forward rolls, back rolls. By the time you're a blue belt, you should have the fundamentals down. And then blue to purple is where you start to learn all the different techniques. So white to blue is like fundamental. Blue to purple is like you're seeing what's out there. You're trying all these different moves. and seeing if you can start to collect some of them that work for you. Now the opposite is true from purple to brown. From purple to brown, you start to narrow your game, and you start to figure out which specific moves work for you, and then you narrow them down to like, all right, I really like the scissor sweep from bottom. I really like, this triangle setup. And instead of having all these different options, you're narrowing your game down. And then from brown to black, it's more about like just perfecting your timing, perfecting your, like we were talking about the muscle memory of like not having to think about doing things. And then black belt, they say that's a whole new journey begins, because now you start to figure out how to teach other people.
Right, and you have to be a black belt to teach in jiu-jitsu, correct?
Yes, you do. Yep. And right now I'm a 4-stripe brown belt. So yeah.
And that's 6 days a week with a little bit of a gap. And that's amazing.
Yeah, with a 6-year gap. I mean, I did take a long break, and I moved up here as a purple belt. So I got my brown belt 2 years ago. So I've been a brown belt for a little over 2 years now. So I have 4 stripes on my brown belt, and each belt gets 4 degrees. So you can be, I'm close. But again, I'm not in any rush. I'm fine doing what I'm doing and training and competing. But a good analogy that someone actually, Gonzaga always says, it's like when you're, and this is cool for me because it has to do with the ocean and the water. So when you're like in the water and you start to feel the bottom, and the water's getting higher, but you can still touch the bottom, and then you get out and you can't feel the bottom anymore. That's like the depth of the skill level of jiu-jitsu. Like the way he says it is like, you don't even know what you don't know yet. Like it's just so much to wrap your head around. Like someone will ask me that doesn't really know about jiu-jitsu, and they'll say like, do you know every submission there is? And the answer is absolutely not. There's so many of them. There's so many transitions. There's so many setups. There's so many, entries to different things. It's like you could spend literally your whole life dedicating yourself to the sport, and there'll still be things that you don't know. And that's
how much video do you watch like on a weekly basis?
Well, now that we're quarantined, a lot of my jiu-jitsu time is spent watching videos. So I'm either grabbing my daughter, who's 5, and practicing. There's actually a funny video on Instagram of me practicing a move on her. She's laughing the whole way.
I'm sure your wife loves that, right?
Yeah. Well, she's the other choice. So if I can't do it on my daughter, my one daughter who's 3 is too little. So the 5-year-old, I can kind of get her and move her around. Yep. My wife's the perfect size, but I don't want to torture her. But no, a lot of video. A good thing I like to do when I'm watching video is to try to anticipate what I'm going to see before they do it. Okay. So like if I'm watching a match and one guy's on his back and one guy's on top, I'll focus on one player, whether it's the top or bottom player, and I'll kind of see what's going on, and I'll try to anticipate what the next thing's going to be, and just to kind of stay sharp on that mental aspect of the game. Quarantine's been tough without training.
Well, that's something I wanted to ask you about. You were talking about how it is addictive. I've read a few stories actually, which I didn't quite anticipate, but it makes a lot more sense. There's a lot of guys who practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They said depression's a big thing because they miss the camaraderie, they miss the contact, they miss the stress relief, and they're having a hard time. And I didn't even think of this, and it does make a lot of sense. Just it's a coping mechanism for people who have, whether it's substance abuse in the past or whatever demons they have. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was their outlet, and without that, a lot of people are having a really hard time. And I didn't even think of that till just now.
It's absolutely 100% a real thing. It is my coping mechanism. It's my stress relief. And I promise you, no matter what is on your mind, when somebody else is trying to choke you unconscious, you will not be thinking about anything other than trying to get out of that choke. Right. So like my favorite thing is like, or I keep saying it's one of my favorite things is like when you're training and rolling, you cannot think about anything else, you know? So whatever's on your mind, anything that's bothering you that day, when you're training, you forget about it. And then it's usually on the way home in the car where I'm like, oh yeah, you know, like start thinking about all the things that, you know, you got to get done and all the things you got to take care of and things that stress you out. But it is a big part of my life right now that I'm missing. And it is a struggle. And, you know, I just hope that we get some sort of either effective treatment or vaccine or whatever. And it's twofold. Selfishly for me, jiu-jitsu, but even my profession as a PE teacher, it's like that's another thing that I love and enjoy doing that I haven't been able to do, is to like be with my students and be in contact with the kids that I teach. And so I just want to get back to like the things that I love to do. And I'm sure everyone in the world does.
Absolutely.
But, you know, jiu-jitsu is a huge part of that. And it's obviously one of the worst things you could probably do with coronavirus in terms of like social distancing. I mean, you're in someone's face sweating and all that. So
I read that was it California, they allow soft martial arts, they call it.
Is that like just
and it's like Tai Chi, Qigong, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you were talking about what was the phrase you used for jiu-jitsu? It was something about what was the
art?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, but obviously there's way too much contact.
Yeah, I mean, it will be possible to drill on your own, you know. Like I've seen a guy from New York. I follow him on Facebook. He actually took like red tape and made squares on his mat that people would have to stay in.
Yeah, like the supermarket with the floors.
Exactly. So they're like squares on the mat and it would be just you and your square, and he'd be up in the front like leading, you know, movement drills and things like that. But there is no substitution, just like wrestling. Like imagine in wrestling, you're just standing there like practicing your shots. There's no substitution for actually getting out there and having a wrestling match.
Right.
You know, same thing with jiu-jitsu. But at this point, I'll take whatever I can get. And even just, you know, like you say, I miss the camaraderie. I miss my teammates.
That's a big part of the fight, I understand.
Yeah. And they've been doing Zoom calls and things like that, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Now, do you hear anything? I know nothing's official. There's a big push to cover graduation. I don't know how they're going to do that. There was some talk about doing town meeting where everybody drives to the parking lot and they use Wi-Fi because they all have to be in the same place. But,
in order for the Zoom to work?
Well, as far as for town meeting to actually count and be official, they all have to meet in the same place. But because of social distancing, they can't get out of their car. So the whole parking lot will be full of people. But there's no Wi-Fi outside the high school. So then they'd have to have a subcontractor with Wi-Fi hotspots in the. It's a mess. But I'm hoping that we don't even have to worry about that. And eventually, it can get to a point. But I don't know when that's going to be. Hopefully soon, but I have no idea.
They just released that 4-phase plan.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
There's no dates attached to it, so I don't know. I think jiu-jitsu might be like a phase 3 or phase 4 activity, unfortunately. But we'll see.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for talking to us. We get a lot of good videos that I'm going to splice in while we were talking about them. What I really want to do is I want to focus on, you know, how interesting a guy I think you are, just your background, things you've done, where you are right now specifically.
Yeah.
And then, you know, obviously I want to focus on the jiu-jitsu, but I had a great time talking with you. But before I go, if someone wants to get into Brazilian jiu-jitsu and there's no coronavirus, pretend that's not going on.
Yep.
What should they do? What should they look for? Is it, hey, it's close to me, or hey, it's a little further away, but it's more my style? Like, should they wait till they're out of high school specifically? Like, what if someone's into it? How would you kind of gear them towards it? What should they do?
So, the first thing I would say is that whenever you're looking at a jiu-jitsu school, first of all, as far as who can do it, high school, whatever. I mean, they have jiu-jitsu kids programs. So I don't think there's any reason not to get started if you're into it at whatever age.
Okay.
The first thing I would say is to make sure that you feel comfortable with the teacher and with the school. Sure. And the best, easiest way to do that is to go check out a class. So my first thing would be like, all right, I want to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What should I do?
Mhm.
Look up on Google, find some places around you that offer it, and just go check it out.
Mhm.
Get the vibe of the class, get the vibe of the instructor. Obviously, if they're like trying to get you to sign a contract on day one, to me that would be a red flag.
Right.
Um, you know, you go check it out. And what I mean by check it out is like just sit and watch a class.
Mhm.
See how does it run? Does the instructor teach a move and then let you go drill it? Are they walking around and helping you or helping the students get the move down?
Mhm.
Are they easygoing? Are they very strict? Are they on their cell phone, like looking down while you're doing the moves, and they look up every once in a while and go, "Oh yeah, good job, guys. Yeah, do another 5."
Right.
Like, kind of get the vibe of the class. That's number one.
Mhm.
The second thing I would say is try to get a feel for the other students in the class. Is it more of a competitive gym where
Mhm.
where everyone that goes there is looking to compete and it's going to be a real high intensity? Is it
Right.
more of a hobbyist type of environment where you get like your everyday guy or girl that goes down and trains and just does it for the fun of it?
Mhm.
And kind of examine your own goals and why you're doing it. And then the last thing is like gi versus no gi. If you're into like, does the school have gi classes, no gi classes? Do they offer any other classes like kickboxing if you were into it?
Mhm.
Things like that. And then the price obviously is going to be a deterrent for some people, but that would be my advice. Look up
Mhm.
on Google, check out a class, get a vibe for the instructor, the classes, the people in the class, um, and then go and try it out and see if you like it.
All right.
That'd be my advice.
Cool. All right. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for joining us. Hopefully, we can maybe talk to you again at some point, maybe when this coronavirus is all over. Maybe see some more of your matches. They're pretty exciting to watch because some of those guys, especially that Eric Johnson, where he's a lot taller than you are. It was like, he's got these long kicks, and then all of a sudden, I fast forward because I want to see what happens at the end. And it's
Yep.
pretty impressive how you get, however you finish them off, you get them a tap and whatnot. But
Yep.
really exciting to watch, Joe. And like I said, maybe in the fall, maybe we can touch base again. I think that once the coronavirus is over, I'm going to start looking for some places to start maybe start practicing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I'll let you know how I'm doing.
Cool. Yeah. There's actually 2 in Natick. So, are you in Natick? Where do you live?
I'm in Belmont now,
Okay.
so there's plenty of them in Boston. They're
Yeah.
all over the place. I'm going to take a look
Yep.
at a few, and then maybe I'll get back to you. I can talk to you maybe off the chat about maybe some more specifics. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, as far
Got
as
it.
like, oh, don't go there. Those guys are hacks, or these
Got
guys
it.
only compare to a competition, or these guys are like the who's those guys in the Karate Kid there? The Cobra
Yeah.
Kai. You don't want to join
Cobra
them.
Kai. Yeah.
But
Super
thanks a lot,
lit.
Joe, and I'll catch up with you later on. All right.
All right.